Hi guys, Mauro here, and welcome to my tutorial. This time I'll talk about contour sketching, silhouettes and values, and some other things. Mostly when I started sketching this on this tutorial, I don't have any plans or anything, but I have a picture on my mind. Here you can see I am sketching a skull, and I was opting for a skull warrior type of thing. And during my sketching process, you can see that I do not draw details. I usually draw key features of the subject that I want to sketch, mostly relying on the silhouettes that I have on my mind or pictured on my mind. Mostly this is not a recommended type of sketching, but for loose sketching and digital painting, this is a fun way to go because it can be quite challenging. This video is on 400% speed, I think, or sped up to 4 times. I do use a photo reference before starting to sketch, or I did have some photo reference there on the hidden layer 1, I think. As you can see, I'm not rolling up, resizing. I want to have a loose feel to it, so I don't pressure myself doing detailing and stuff. I just want to have a general feel of what I am sketching, then place some values and block it later. I was thinking of a Dark Souls inspired painting or something like that. I was gonna plan to put a firekeeper in there, but generally didn't work out because I wanted it to be more focused on the skeleton guy, not on the frontal subject, which is the firekeeper, or a firekeeper inspired character. A lot of guides in the industry will mostly tell you that this process is really not recommended. I do mean it and do take their word for it. It's just fun for me, just fun. I don't stress myself and do some complicated stuff. And I do learn along the way when I sketch these things, so I like it. Now, as you can see, I am blocking the subject. Oh, speaking about the blocking, mostly I use values first before color. And if you can see my palette there, I specialized my palette so that it would suit my taste. Mostly I do super saturated color, but later on tone it down. About the palette, I mostly I just sample it from pictures or some paintings that I see. Just go grab a classical painting, splotch some colors there, then sample it and see how it goes. Right now I'm doing the initial blocks. One thing in mind, when you're sketching, be sure that you first put it on low resolution first, then moving the resolution higher and higher until you get your desired resolution. But the standard is 300 dpi, but mostly nowadays they do it 600 because it's the industry standard. And I'm just using a low-end laptop here, so please bear with me. Pressing it up do help in adding details on the painting. Now I'm working on the skull. Putting the lights in there. then reducing the opacity of the sketch. I don't usually stress on the details. Then on the Archive skirt character, and then I move it down back to 300. I just go and scramble around resolutions, then apply color balance layer to add an initial hue on the value blocking that I put. I was opting for a cool look, not the awesome cool, but the temperature of the fading. As you can see, I made the reference layer visible. You know, there's no shame in using references. In fact, it would be better if you use photo references, because you would learn how to sketch along the way. And some guys don't have so much time on practicing and stuff. But it's not an excuse. Mostly when you get on this type of job, you don't really slack off. But for some beginners out there who still don't know what to do, I do stress on using photo references, because as you sketch digitally, you would learn along the way with the rendering and such. It's not the best way to go, but definitely you will learn something. Because when I started painting, I was self-taught, and I don't even know jack shit about people. We're famous at that time. Before I was painting, I was doing comics here in the Philippines. Mostly indie comics. And adding the values for the hair. When you paint, you try to be relaxed. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. And when you paint, mostly this is for the beginners, don't speed up the process. Take it slow and learn slowly, because your mind or your brain has to catch up with the thing you're doing. If you speed up, you're mostly messing up yourself, because you would pick up wrong habits along the way, or not learn anything at all, because it's too fast. It's too fast to process. Then the armor, values in the armor, key details, the rib cage. I do stress on people learning how to draw with anatomy. Here I did not base any credible anatomy reference, so I'm mostly gonna mess up in some part of the painting and then later correct it, which takes up a lot of time. I do pause the video and the recording, because I have to take a break. Oh, one more thing. It's good to apply the Pomodoro technique. We use 25 minutes of work and then 5 minutes of rest. But I do modify it to my taste, which is 25 and working up to 30, and also increasing the break time. But my maximum break time is up to 1 hour, so that it doesn't give too much information to process for the brain. Mostly normal people like us are just watching the video and hoping they'll pick up along the way. I do recommend the Pomodoro technique. Then working up my values on the face. I mean the skull, which is basically the face. I just gave up along the way, and then and then just imposed the reference photo beside it so that I could render it specifically and easy. Because I tried to picture it on my mind mostly. I just realized that it would take a lot of time if I sketch it value, value and stroke by stroke. Oh, one thing about values. For beginners, if you want to learn values, you should look up to photographs or pick images with sophisticated lighting on it. Then try to desaturate the image or the subject that you are learning from. Then try to sample the highest amount of value that you can see. On photorealistic painting, you could almost see near 1% or 5% dark values on it. It's just dark, really. And near black. Here I'm pressing it up, and saving. Oh, one more thing. Please save. When I was doing this painting, the laptop crashed on me. Even though it's a gaming laptop, it still has limits. A lot of guys say that it's about the skill, not about the equipment. But sometimes having an equipment goes a lot. How can I say this? Goes a long way. Because where would you test your newfound skill if there is no equipment? That is such the problems of newcoming artists in the developing countries like the Philippines. You don't really have so much access to high-end stuff, and the high-end stuff are mostly darn expensive. Almost a person, an annual paycheck, I think. For technicality's sake, I am using an MSI laptop, the Classic Series CX C2 6270L 16PH, the Classic Series for the Philippine edition. Oh, my neighbor's grinding metal again, using his grinder. You can hear it along the background noise when I'm recording. I do stress that you use basic brush first when learning, because sometimes it's not the brush that would give you an edge, but it's mostly being able to use the brush properly. I think on this particular painting, I just limited myself to 20 types of brushes, but mostly focusing on just 4. As this painting progresses, you can soon see my influences as an artist. Then working up on cheekbones, upper values. Oh, I almost forgot. When I tried to add some render job on it, I don't have any particular technique, but I do use basic hatching. That's just about it. I don't add complicated rendering stuff. While I do opt for a glassy digital look, I would want it to look like a legitimate oil painting. You can see that sooner or later as you progress along my videos. About schools. Here in the Philippines, there are a lot of schools that will teach you about digital art, but don't mostly delve about the industry of game design. I myself, I just do freelance work and I don't even have a particular loyalty to any studio because, it's really hard to find a job here in the Philippines. Mostly for art-related jobs such as this. And at first, art was not even much of my passion. I have a passion for programming and music composition, but when my friend introduced me into the comic scene and made my own comics, I learned that my true calling was art, mostly on the digital art and the comics. Not Western comics, Eastern, mostly manga. Not the anime-ish type, not the moe demographic, but I mostly use the seinen type. Inspired by Berserk, by Kentaro Miura. Oh, about the passion thing, I think it's not recommended to follow your passion. No offense, but it is recommended that you follow where you pursue excellence, not just passion, because there would come a time that when you learn many things, then you start to go a little bit higher, you put your game a little bit higher on the pro level sense, then you start to realize that it gets harder and harder. Then you will soon have to find a better practice method, something that will suit your schedule, because in the real world, you really have many things, many have commitments. If I'm not doing digital painting, I mostly do farming and stuff. Mostly woodcrafting, sculpting on wood, making furnitures and stuff. Because mind you, I do live near the provinces, near the mountain province exactly. Where it's so darn cold. And my sense of humor could quite go bland. Sorry. Then adding the hues. Oh, about this one, the hue was sampled from a plant picture, rose I think. Because I was opting for a semi-Victorian era inspired or Lovecraftian inspired artwork. My hue mixing is quite exotic. I don't really do follow much stuff, but I do have a background in color theory. It's kinda neat. For me, using lighter hues is like superimposing light, because it's lighter. I mean, common sense, it's light. When you try to desaturate it, we would see that the values would just get lighter, or sometimes just flat. Going on for the nasty spikes, the rib cage, the lower part, that's near the thoracic area. Quite give up along the way using these colors. You would see that sooner. Because sometimes in digital painting, trial and error works. If you're just self-taught or just learning yourself and have no access to such schools like FZD and stuff, I do recommend experimenting because it goes a long way. Don't be afraid to test new ideas, study a lot of things. But when you study a lot of things, when I say that, you have to choose what you study. Because realistically speaking, there are techniques and technical stuff that would work for you and won't work for you. Just have to find the right feel or what the nearest proximate to your mental image or your imaginations, or simply said, your creative taste. Sketching the hair. A friend of mine once told me when he caught me digital painting, and I was at my room and painting this stuff, he said it was so metal. Then I set it a little bit darker, set the value a little bit darker, because let's just face it, a lighter tone and superimposition of lighter tones would make it not dark. And I calibrated my tablet, as you can see. Now this is where contrasts go, because yellow and near orange is the negative color for bluish hues or dark blue hues, so you would get a lot of contrast when you put orange on negatives. Do try that too. Just splotch some values over there, colorize it, then test on the saturations, test for the negatives, and then try to combine color and stuff. Oh, also about the swatches that I use, I do sample them. The lower portion, the second to the last row, I just sampled it from a rock formation image. Then work my bias right up there. And the other one was from a picture from a junk shop, I think. The last row swatches. Mostly a lot of pros would just go around, we're almost half the time allowed for the painting, and then within 30 minutes I think this skull thing would just be finished by any other pro artist. But the nearest technique here is, for practicality's sake and for speed's sake and industry's sake, if you have a picture of a skull or an image of a skull, you just put it there, place it on overlay, then you try to paint over it a little bit, then you'll get the values sooner or later, and it's a lot faster. But for me, I do it from the bottom to the ground up. That way I don't feel like I'm cheating myself, because let's face it, I'm just learning here. This is just a study painting, not much of a pro painting that I do for freelance stuff. And about my music selection, yeah, I can quite go to the extremes of super bland and super cringy pop, and then back to metal or cinematic music, which is kinda cool. Yay! They're putting a lot of values there, mostly oranges and blues. Because nothing could give you more sense of loneliness than blues. That's quite on the musical context, actually. Sorry. As you can see, mostly some guys would just used to do a lot of overlays and layer work on this stuff. But I do like doing it the old-fashioned way, like kind of like the painting traditional painting techniques. Because let's face it, I do suck at digital sometimes, and I do shine a lot on traditional mediums. But sadly, I have a bad camera right here, and right now, and the only accessible thing that I could produce with good content is with my laptop. Oh, one more thing about art stuff. When you try to do something or decide on something, be pragmatic about it. Just be practical and be honest with yourself. Because sometimes it takes up a lot of frustration and it gives a lot of frustration to some artists if they are not assessing themselves quite honestly. I have a background on pastel and oil painting, so that's what I'm using right here right now. Because what you can do on traditional could also reflect on digital, and sometimes I've seen a lot of guys who are, I think, better than me. Actually, it's really kind of counterintuitive to say that those guys are better when you're in this industry, because you won't get hired with that type of attitude. Sometimes it just takes a lot of courage just to put a lot of face value on yourself. As I was saying, back to the topic, I've seen a lot of traditional guys who don't even own a pen tablet, but when they try it, when they try to learn something from it, give them a little bit of a week or so, and then they'll surprise you with their outputs. I was even surprised myself that I could even do some rendering like that. It's kind of fun. It's the fun in the drastic long process. It's about surprising yourself. If you do surprise yourself, you would see quite a lot of improvements. Not unlike taking up a very serious position or poise on stuff. That could get you a lot quite frustrated. About the rotate tool, mostly you just press R and then Photoshop will give you the rotate tool. I do have a bad habit of rotating stuff, because as much as I wanted to do it, I wanted to do it my way, which is near the traditional way of doing stuff. Oh, about the pen tablet I'm using an Intuos Pro, the small size tablet, I think, smallest ones. For beginners out there, I think it would go a long way if you would invest on yourself. Do set some work goals, but not very hard. Try on smaller goals until you get better and better on doing this stuff. When I started doing comics, I was like, I don't know anything. Oh God. Let's just pray this works. And about comics, we do have Comic-Cons here in the Philippines. Mostly on April, which is SummerCon. Then on August, which is our IndieCat or the Indie Comic-Con. And then we have the annual Comic-Con, which is the WinterCon on November, which is near my birthday. Yay! And nobody cares. For the beginners out there, I think you have to invest. You have to learn and be smart about investing on your stuff and on your tools. Mostly, some of us who don't even have a job or something, they just tend to waste money and then buy a lot of stuff, buy a lot of medium like pastels, expensive color pencils, expensive dyes, expensive canvases. Like I said, having this stuff goes a long way, but also it should be in concerto with your skill, because if you don't have the skill to use them, you're just wasting money. And see what works for you. Later on in time, you would soon learn that, oh, pastel doesn't work for me. I don't like it. I like color pencil more. And then when you get a little bit better, you say, oh, wow, it's good combining pastel with color pencil and stuff. Or using color pencil job and later soft toning it with pastel, or diluting color pencils with mineral oil to achieve a watercolor effect. Then again, you have to invest properly on your equipment, because even though it's kinda cheap having color pencil, let's face it, you're still using money to buy it. So you have to be keen on buying what is essential and what is not. Working around, then hatching stuff. Mostly the orange hue that I put there, the light orange hue or the light yellow hue, would soon be revealed when the painting would take a lot of good hues on it. Because in color theory, white light is made up of three basic colors, which is red, green, and blue, which is the RGB. And sometimes when it strikes a surface, it diffuses light, or absorbs light, or reflects light. When it diffuses light, some stray photons, it's kinda get science in shit. The stray photons would reflect off a different type of spectrum. Like when you see the effect of light on a black feather. If you have been quite keen on seeing game fowls like chickens, perhaps the roosters, those with black feathers tend to have a greenish tint on it, because they tend to reflect and diffuse some some green photon, green hues or green tint, which is caused by the photons that strike the object. And greasing the brush, calibrating the tablet. Mostly when using the tablet, I would recommend that use it on its lowest setting, which is kinda use a lot of pressure first, then slowly inching your way to a more sensitive setup. That way, you don't stress yourself, and you would find that sweet spot where your strokes would be good or better than expected. Some of my guys at our art group, mostly when I started comics, which is Red Manga Alliance here in the Philippines, I see some of the new bloods, when they try to do digital painting, they get frustrated because they don't calibrate their tablets. They don't learn some stuff about their tools, which is kind of odd for me, because when you buy stuff or buy equipment, you should learn it first. A little bit of knowledge won't hurt. Although I'm the type of guy that ditches the instruction manual like any normal guys would do. But a sane person would not ditch the instruction manual and then just read it. Do yourself a favor and read instruction manuals. It would help. Promise. I learned my lesson the hard way. Because I want to rush results when I was first starting it. I mean, when I first started in this industry as a freelancer. And if you're quite into reading, which I think most of you do, I do recommend reading Gorin no Sho or The Book of Fire Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, because it would help you overcome mental stuff. Because mostly, as I realized when I got better and better, as time go by. Oh God, I'm stuttering. You would learn that when you rush things, you don't get your desired results. So, if you want to have good results, don't rush it. I mean, seriously, don't, never rush it. Because if you do, you would be the only one who would get hurt in the end. It's just like gardening. You cannot force some plants to flower and bear fruit trees and stuff. They have their own seasons. So, just like any other living thing, and you're a living thing yourself, you're a human, you shouldn't rush yourself. You should just I don't want to impose philosophy and stuff because it's not my thing. I don't like forcing people to have the same type of thinking that I do have, but it would help a lot if you would learn not to rush stuff, because everything has its seasons. Oh, and then you see me using the value there, the curve there. Curve tool, I think. I just check for the negatives and the contrasts of the values that I use. It's a good thing that you try to experiment on this stuff, because you would have your own better way of analyzing your own work if you know how to use the layer controls. Oh god. So cold. And I have colds. And working on the armor. Just blocking some stuff, adding a little bit of light. Adding a little bit of details, flipping it over because I'm lazy. Then trying to add another, or trying to add some tints on it so that the decal would look cool. Then I check for the value just by rotating. It's kind of my bad habit actually. Blocking. Either adding another layer of armor. As you can see, I'm just hatching it. I don't do elaborate stuff. Too much elaborate stuff that take a lot of technique. Oh, about the self-taught thing earlier that I've said. I kinda took art classes after I graduated from college, so most people don't have a lot of money to invest in after they graduate here in the Philippines, but I think for me it's money well spent. So I get to do the thing that I love, or the things that I love. At the same time, not stressing it. Then for it, adding the armor, shoulder plate, armor. You can see I just use the local values, the local hues. I don't use too much elaborate palettes. That's a good tip actually. Learn how to use the local values and hues when painting, because it would give you a more cohesive look to your painting and not some outlandish type of palettes that would give a lot of convoluted contrasts. Because using local values would give it a sense of unity, give your painting a sense of unity. Work on the rib cage and some of the armor soonish. Let's put a lot of splotches on this stuff. I don't really put a lot of thinking on it. But a lot of pros would tell you that you have to plan first before you paint, because let's face it, even though if you're given a lot of skill or a lot of talent, there would come a time that you really have to plan for the piece that you would have to execute. Because art is also a strategic thing. As I've said, art is more mental stuff than having the technique. Mostly the practice would go a long way, but having the mental endurance and the mental fortitude to really stomach studying it would help you. For non-gifted guys like me and the average Joes, or the average Filipino like myself, not being racist here, would have not have a lot of talents, because I see a lot of Chinese guys who are really good. I mean, they're like god level or something. Let's take Feng Zhu and Ruan Jia as an example. They're really pro. I mean, they're god level. Meanwhile, average Joes like us, or like myself, mostly do plan on my pieces first before I paint it. But this time I want to have, I want to, I want to put it a little step higher and just freestyle and paint it on it, sketch paint on it. Because if you do not push yourself, you won't achieve that. You won't achieve the goal that you have set for yourself. Like myself, mm, I do set on learning how to paint on the fly, not relying too much on my planning phase. But then again, it would go back on you, doing a lot of training and doing it slowly, learning it the right way, not by forcing it upon yourself. Because if you force it, your brain would have a lot of things to process if you're very fast. That's why take it slow so that you would internalize it. And when you internalize it, it won't go away with you. It would stay. The skill would stay. Trust me. In here, that the image that I used to sample the hues was from a junk shop, so it would give you a rusty feeling. It would give the painting a rusty feeling, because I was opting for that. And then with stuff, flipping it over, trying to add more details, more focus. That's what the painting really gives you. It really gives a sense of flesh on it. Oh, talking about my influences, I really am influenced by Feng Zhu and Ruan Jia, and mostly some YouTubers out there, like Wylop, I think, if I pronounce that well. I am inspired by those type of artists, and they have become my influences when I was learning this stuff. Because as I've said, painting is a little bit more different than doing manga and comics. In manga and comics, you really would have to do a lot of stuff. Mostly when you're independent and you're just the only one who would write, who would sketch, then ink, panel, add some tones, and then add some colors in it if it's required, do the cover pages, print it yourself. It takes up a lot of work. So that's why they say comics is a labor of love. While painting is capturing the whole message in one, which is kinda a little bit hard for some comic book artists. I mean, for me when I was beginning painting. Now I'm value checking the values, saturating it, checking for stray colors. Because when you mix colors, you would have different types of color combinations, and when you saturate it to the extreme, you would see some stray colors, like some pinks on it, even though you used blue, dark blue, and brownish tint. Oh, back to the painting and comic stuff. Comics is a labor of love, while painting is also a labor of love. It does takes time. and mostly some of the guys here in the Philippines that I've met really have a bad stigma or really have bad communities. Sometimes saying that comic book artists are not better, and sometimes comic book artists saying that painters are not better because making comics is harder. No, it doesn't work like that. I mean, it would do a lot of negative stuff to other people if you think like that. I guess because it doesn't benefit the community at all. If you're trying to be better, you should also have a better character. Not that I'm saying that I'm pushing it to that I'm pushing the people to be better, but sometimes having the right attitude goes a long way. And if you want to be pro, act like a pro. And if you want to be respected, respect other people. Simple as that. It doesn't take much for the equation. It's just a simple comparison, a little bit of math, and a lot of common sense. Okay, on the contrast, the difficulty of painting, I think in one sitting, painting would be quite easier, a little bit. But capturing the right message while painting is the hardest part. While in comics you have a lot of serialization, a lot of pages to capture the message, while in painting you just have one image and that's just it. Meanwhile, the contrast of painting and comics making is a little bit blurred, but as you can see, comics is quite hard also. You have to write a script, you have to make sure that the art style works perfectly with the story, you have to make sure that the paneling is okay, it delivers a good message across your audiences, the composition is alright for every panel and for every page that you make. While in painting, it just takes one composition, but heck, it's also hard. My advice to painters out there who want to be in the comics industry, since comics is a little bit of commercial art, you should learn how to be able to mass produce your art style. I mean, redraw your characters over and over again, make character sheets, have some planning phase. As I said, art takes a lot of planning, so you have to plan for everything, the design of the character, the armor, the weapons, the environments, just like game design. That's why I know a lot of concept artists who are really good at making comics too, and vice versa. Meanwhile, for comic book artists who want to learn digital painting, I guess it would boil down to having a lot of technical skill, or knowing some technical skill that would work for you. Because as a comic book artist, when I started painting, I get quite a lot of frustration because I didn't get the result that I wanted. Meanwhile, with ink and paper, it's quite easy. So, a little bit of my sentiments here. Do not underestimate any form of art. Each type of art really takes up a lot of work. And if it takes up a lot of work, it takes up a lot of investment on the person, financially, emotionally, mentally. On the detailing kind of stuff, if you don't have any pictures to use as an overlay mask for creating that grit on the painting, just like Feng Zhu says, you could try to use my technique, which is just hatching on it using a larger canvas. Mostly the recommended size is just, the lowest should be 5 pixels. A size number 5. I don't think they measure it in pixels. Or do they? Because even though I'm not applying any texture yet, the hatching itself gives it a lot of texture. And sometimes, one word of advice here, I tend to simplify stuff, so as you can see, if you could simplify a complicated task or a complicated type of work, it would give you a lot of edge versus just doing it and assuming it. It's like some other teachers who just say, oh, I have one teacher that time that said, our teacher, I guess, he said, no, don't just question it, just do it. It just works that way. The assumption works that way. It's true that the assumption works that way mostly on game design, because larger windows means more expensive things, or having big swords, or a character wielding a big sword would be badass or something like that. But then again, sometimes you should challenge the convention. Just like that kind of trauma that you get when you first play Dark Souls. I mean, heck, I underestimated Dark Souls, and that was my biggest mistake and the best learning experience that I've ever had. In the real world, you could use these assumptions, just like if he's armed, it means he's dangerous. Even if he's small, it doesn't mean that he's not dangerous. The size and the height of a person doesn't owe much to his prowess in using the weapon. So sometimes, or mostly not sometimes, most of the time, please do not underestimate assumptions, or do not just assume things. It is better, it is left best, oh god, I'm stuttering. It is left best tested. You should test the assumptions first if it works for you or it doesn't. And then adding some stuff in the armor, hatching it. Yeah, I know my freestyle method is quite tedious for some people. That's how I enjoy. I enjoy doing a little bit of detail and texture work. It's mostly about what floats your boat. And about the brush stuff on sketching, you could achieve this texture even though you're using basic brushes, because mostly I just use hatches and sampled some pastels and pastel strokes. Some of my pastel strokes, I scanned them, then trace them over and use them as my brushes. There's a lot of tutorials out there on YouTube on how to make your own custom brushes in Photoshop. Now, selection tool, I'm using selection tools to give that a little bit of cutting. I would suggest that you would have to look on paintings about or tutorials about cutting and blocking, because mostly here I've used blocking on the dark values while cutting is used for the edges, or the contour, or the figures that I would have to block. Working on the spikes. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's nasty spikes over there. Okay, back to technical stuff. When you're hatching, mostly I try to use the lighter value to superimpose on a darker value. Sometimes sometimes other guys use it the other way around, which is using a lighter value then blocking it with a darker value. I mean, as I've said, whatever floats your boat would work. Adding other spikes there, a bit of blocking, then adding the light. No, one more point to stress. Whatever you do traditionally while coloring could also be translatable digitally. So it's just also like doing traditional stuff, then kinda doing it digitally. We're about to finish this tutorial, so I hope you learned a lot from this video, and I would post episode 2 later. So thank you guys, please like and subscribe. Stay awesome.